I think it's not worth it because there's so many women out there in the world, literally, that there's so many options that you could find the person who is right for you, who you're attracted to enough to justify being in the relationship with them for the long term, while also matching morally and virtually. I mean, virtuously.
Welcome back to the Out of the Box podcast. My name is Jose, and I'm here with my co host, Theo. And this is a podcast where we talk about different areas of study. Sometimes we have just questions that we want to figure out in the world. And what we're really doing is trying to seek for truth here. And so, if that sounds like something that you would like to join us with in this journey, please subscribe to our channel. And we hope that you enjoy this podcast today. So today we're going to be talking about virtues, physicality, or emotional stability. So these are different qualities that we might be able to find in a future partner that we want to date, get engaged with, marry. So which one's more important than the other? We're going to be talking about that in this podcast. So, Steele, we have virtues, right? Virtues, which mean the capacity of the human being to make, I guess, decisions that coincide with truth in a way, right? Which could be the virtue of humility, the virtue of patience, the virtue of uh courageousness,
Right?
um
Honesty.
honesty. Yeah, different virtues. Then we have the area of physicality, right? Which means, like, the partner could be a supermodel or somebody super handsome, beautiful, whatever. And then we have the third category, which is the emotional side, emotional stability, right? So
Personality.
if you could choose a partner that was strong in one of these three categories, which one would you choose?
Oh man, I don't know if I can pick one.
And let's say uh they were really strong in one of these particular areas, but in the other two areas they're average, just kind of average.
That's Yeah, that's a hard one. If I had to hey, if I absolutely had no choice and had to pick one, it would probably be the virtues because I feel like that's probably just what I personally value most. Because I know other people who have kind of disagree with me on that, like, saying that you can, and that's fine for other people, like in terms of being able to date people with different beliefs than you, like religious or even just moral beliefs. But for me personally, that's kind of hard because I feel like it conflicts so much with my personality, and I feel like not like it's hard to say, I guess, but like it sounds weird, but I feel like almost like a hypocrite if I were to be in a very serious, long-term, lifelong relationship with someone who I don't agree with on like moral values because like I feel like I would have to talk about them behind my back almost, and then vice versa, and I wouldn't be able to be fully honest with them and like, so I feel like out of all of those, because I could, because maybe the emotional part, maybe the emotional stability isn't there, but at least we agree on morals. But then I could see how that emotional stability not being there could be a problem. So that's why it's so complicated. What about you though?
Yeah.
Like if you had to pick one, like what do you
And
think?
you know what, I had this conversation, a similar conversation with my dad, and we actually came down to the idea that virtues potentially are more long lasting, right? Because if you have a virtuous person, um you know they'll most likely they will stay virtuous throughout their life. But for example, the beauty aspect, yes, they could be beautiful for the next maybe 20 years, but that starts fleeting, in your older years.
Everyone's right.
So, I think beauty then becomes in the eye of the beholder, right? Which comes down to the personality and the experiences that you can have with this person, right? Which comes down to the way they process information, or the way that they think about the world, which comes down to the values, right? What they value, what they believe in, which therefore which stems from their virtuousness, right?
No, and
So
I just realized with you saying those things that physical beauty does go away with age, like you said, but I think also emotional stability changes too. I feel like
mm,
I don't feel like anyone's emotionally stable at all times forever for the rest of their life. I think everyone goes through a roller coaster of periods of emotional stability based on people passing away, major life changes, emergency situations, personality changes, lifestyle changes. If someone gets diagnosed with cancer, can you really expect them to be emotionally stable when they
yeah,
first get hit
that's
with that?
true.
So, like, when you're married, like, a marriage, they say in sickness and in health, till death do us part, like, it talks about that, like, being there for your partner through good and bad times. And the
Yeah,
Bible, I think, supports that too. So, like, emotional
yeah,
stability can change. I mean, we're talking about decades of marriage or a long-term relationship, it can change.
yeah. So it seems like, the emotional stability aspect and the physical aspect are both change like interchangeable, right? Like they can vary throughout time. Therefore, long lasting and more foundational is the virtues of
Right.
the person, right? Because let's say I was with a virtuous woman, right? And she happened to have an emotional breakdown, right? As a virtuous woman and as a virtuous man, or striving for virtue, uh one would be understanding, right? She would understand, like, hey, like, you know I'm going through this. I know my partner has me in this situation. I trust in him, and I know he's going to do the best to be with me. So I'll be understanding of his situation if he ever gets frustrated a little bit. And from my side, I'll be like, yeah, well, I know she'll be understanding as well, and I'm being understanding of her. So it's just like, I think it's a way of like processing information, how, like, knowing that your partner is going to react a certain way and is going to be consistent throughout time, right? In the sense that their intentions are going to stay the same, because, like you said, if both people have an emotional breakdown or something,
Yeah.
right? They go bankrupt, or they lose their house or whatever,
Right.
or they lose a child,
Yeah.
that could hit both parties. And
Exactly.
so, even though both might not be in the same uh emotional state as they were before, the fact that their intentions and their inner programming is already preset a certain way, they know how the other person is going to react.
Maybe the foundation is virtues, and maybe if you have a solid foundation of virtues, then, when things like that happen, then you can survive it. And, marriage is like emotional stability changes all the time, and emotions change all the time in marriage. You go through a honeymoon phase, then you go through the phase of like where the relationship literally changes in terms of the way you feel about each other. And then even the late stages of marriage, it changes again, to where you're more like almost not necessarily dependent on each other, but like in a place where you see practical use of the relationship, whereas it might have started as the rose colored glasses in the very beginning, but now it's more of a realistic version of the relationship. You recognize and accept each other's faults all the way through, So so yeah, I do think emotions in general can change in marriage. If someone cheats on their partner during a marriage, which is can happen, and then sometimes people can survive the marriage and actually get through that despite the emotional instability of such a horrible or rough thing like that happening. So it's possible some people will get divorced because of it, and some people are able to make the marriage still work. So even if there's emotionally turbulent times, people can still survive in their marriage. So it seems like what we're getting at is despite emotions changing in a marriage or emotional stability, people can still make the relationship work in some cases. So then maybe the relationship doesn't depend on emotional stability. I mean, and it depends, like obviously it depends, right? Like if someone is emotionally unstable for long periods of time, for like years or decades, or a severe mental changes happen, maybe the development of a mental disorder that completely changes their personality. But, like, even when people get dementia, but their spouse is still there for them during their last moments, it really depends on the person and the circumstances too, so
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. And I mean, if you start thinking about it, because I want to see if I can play devil's advocate and see the benefits of the other two, right? Because you know, physical beauty in itself is sometimes what initially attracts you to a certain partner,
yeah,
right? And to say that it's not important, it's false, right? Because we have to be attracted to our partner in some way, shape, or form, you
right,
know. Um in this case, we're talking about the physicality of the partner. And for men, it's actually more important in a way to have that physical aspect, just because of our nature of how we're built. We're drawn to more of the physical aspect of things. Women do too, but they rely more on the emotional support, right? Which we'll get into in a little bit.
right,
But it's for some reason, like it kind of just happened. But yeah, men are attracted to the physical aspect, and then women are attracted because of the emotional aspect. So I'm looking forward to like dissecting those. But what do you think about the physical aspect? You know, it is important. The pros. You I guess think of having somebody that you can feel attracted to and enjoy looking at or enjoy going to, right?
yeah,
uh
yeah,
I guess it's more of a for men. You think about more of the pleasure, right? Like aspect
right.
of a relationship, like more of the romantic aspect. You feel attracted to them. I guess I don't know if you thought about this, but you know the aspect of people thinking like, oh, how are my children going to turn out? Like I
I never
want them to look good and also be attractive so that they can attract future
I never
spouses.
really thought about that, to be honest, but when you say it, it makes sense because that could even happen unconsciously, you know? And then if you look at evolutionary psychology studies and theories and the little bit that I've heard, I remember hearing things like that we kind of choose partners based on health, on producing healthy offspring.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of factors that go into that, and physical. There's certain elements of, I guess, of physicalness of a woman that men unconsciously perceive as producing healthy offspring. And this has been shown by different research studies. Doesn't mean research is always right, no, but then again, research points to certain patterns, and it's interesting to kind of understand and study them and try to figure out why human nature is the way it is, particularly with guys. There's also been, I know, research showing that men are more visually stimulated by things. And it definitely makes sense when you look at the stereotypical male and in terms of attraction to females, all of the physical things that we find attractive in women, they're all visual things. That's just kind of like the way, I don't know how else to say it. That's the way it is. We're attracted to women who have bigger eyes and other features, right? And certain styles of, I guess, hair and dress and all that sort of stuff. That's like, I think a lot of those studies kind of point visual creatures, I guess, more visually stimulated. And as you said kind of earlier, women perhaps, at least maybe the majority of women, tend to be more emotionally stimulated and for certain, I'm sure, chemical, biological reasons for that. Um, so it's interesting to think about and try to pick it apart and understand why we are the way we are, you know? It's
Yeah,
yeah, and then I don't know.
and
I'm sure, I mean, women are obviously visually stimulated, but like
as well,
there's
yeah.
different levels, I think, for each. particular category, I guess.
Yeah, and the emotional aspect, I can understand why some woman might want to have that emotional stability because most of the time women tend to be feelers, right? And so they want to know that if if something, goes wrong, the man is going to be able to stand up for her or be able to be there for her or provide for the family or emotionally be stable so that she can feel comfortable and open to be herself, right? To be herself and to show her femininity. Um, Otherwise, she's going to have to take the role of the man, I guess, in a way, and be the strong one, which takes her out of her femininity and in a way feels unnatural in a way. And I think a lot of people might write some comments about this maybe just because of the whole feminine movement that's going on. But in a way, women want to their natural state of being is being in their feminine nature, right? And so they this world, from what I've noticed, likes balance, likes a balance. And so if if somebody is prone to being on their feminine, they they want a masculine energy to supplement that feminine energy, which in a way is provided through the emotional side, the emotional stability, right? Because women tend to think more in the emotional language, right? And which is sometimes hard to understand as men, right? But women tend to deal more with emotions and how people are going to feel and how people are going to react. Um, and so they look for somebody that they can have as a foundation, as a stable partner, so that if something goes sideways, or they break down, they know that their partner is going to be there to provide that
Support,
stability
right, to support them.
to
Exactly.
support.
Yeah, that's true. And so then you could see how women perhaps are not as attracted to men who don't show traits of emotional stability. And what do women tend to say they are attracted to? Men who are confident, have like high self-esteem, I guess, who are successful. Those are all traits of like that point to success, stability, someone who can, I guess, take care of, take care of you. I don't know how else to say. I mean, there's different levels, of course, but yeah, I think like what you're saying, to handle whenever I fall into a situation or to be able to support me or whatever, right? Something like that. And I'm sure there's different ways to explain it, but yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the virtue aspect, you know, would you still date someone if they were like really virtuous? Like you could tell like this person is a virtuous woman,
Right.
but she's not physically attractive to you.
So you're gonna ask the hard questions now, aren't you? I hope you know to answer this too.
I mean, I mean, in all honesty, we just kind of mentioned it right now. I know at the beginning of the conversation, we said that they would be average in the other two aspects, but really strong in just one.
Right.
Of course, we live in a such a multifaceted world where we have people that have different strengths. And so you can have the possibility of having a really beautiful woman and be virtuous. But if you had to choose, and all the women around you were not physically attractive, like we're just creating like
Okay.
um
Hypothetical.
a scenario.
Well, if none of the women around me were attractive by, I guess we could say, today's standards, then a new level of attraction would develop because you'd have to base it on new criteria, you know?
But what if you knew there was other women in other cities
Oh,
that were more physically attractive, you know?
I
But you didn't know if they were virtuous. You know, you just know that the woman like near you are
oh,
virtuous,
well,
but
that's easy because I've actually not gone with women who I found attractive just because I didn't think their virtues matched mine. I've turned down women who I found very attractive or even like supermodel level attractiveness, but our virtues didn't match, so I knew it wasn't gonna work and it wasn't worth it. So,
yeah.
you know, so and actually I've been attracted to women who maybe aren't like supermodel level attractiveness, which you know what I mean? Or maybe I guess moderate attractiveness, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. Um and I've been attracted to women and I guess in that range who because their morals match my morals, you know, and I was able to look past maybe they don't meet all of my standards of what I'm attracted to in an ideal sense, but because they matched my moral values, I was attracted to them. So I find that to be an interesting thing. You know, at least that's what I personally kind of experienced and you know, so but maybe my standards aren't that high for attractiveness. I don't know compared to other people, I don't know. But I still have standards, you know, like there's still women that I am attracted to and that I'm not naturally attracted to. And the beautiful thing about that is every guy has different standards for what they're attracted to. There's some guys who are attracted to women that other men wouldn't find attractive. And that's what's so cool about it because then that means that in some way there's some person for everyone almost, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know about the math on that, but you know what I mean? Like,
You know, but I think about it too, you know, like, yeah, so of course, you know, maybe some guys are will lean a little bit more towards the physicality of the person, right?
mm,
But if you think about long-term relationships, you know, long-term lifetime relationships, will they be will they enjoy having that person next to them for their whole life?
I can tell
You
you,
know, that's one of the things I think about because when I was agreeing to the idea of virtue being the most valuable was because when I was talking to my dad about it, you know, we were saying that long term, you know, yes, beauty will fade, you know, and stuff like that. But if you can have a woman or a man, right, for a woman um who date men, that provides that virtuousness, right? That is humble, that is patient, that is kind, that is honest, you know, that you can trust completely and you can enjoy your time with them, you know. You can whenever you have a conflict, you're able to resolve it pretty easily and kind of get on with your day, you know, not like hold grudges and like, you know, have all these wounds. Of course, everybody has some brokenness in them and their past, but if this person is positive, if this person is, you know, joyful, you know, and resilient, hardworking, you know, you think about it, you're like, wow, well, you know, they provide a lot of the qualities that would be foundational to have a future with someone, right? Somebody because if you think about it, what if they're super beautiful and stuff, but you're always having conflicts, you're
mm,
always having fights, you know, you can never reach an agreement, um,
stressful.
or the opposite way, you try to dialogue with them and they never you try to have a dialogue with them and they never agree with anything. They're just like, oh well, you can do whatever. They're super passive, you know, like yeah,
Yeah,
whatever you like. So
just
there's no you can't wrestle with them,
and
right?
from experience, it just hasn't really worked when I've tried that, you know, and that's I think I've learned, kind of learning the hard way that, you know, even if I'm attracted to them physically, trying to make a relationship work where we have different values and don't agree, or even when there's a personality conflict where you just the personalities clash, or maybe they do things that you don't feel comfortable with. I've had that, you know, like they do things that you kind of disagree with, or things that you wouldn't do or just don't feel comfortable around or doing. then that can make it really uncomfortable being around that person or being in a relationship with that person. And then you start thinking ahead, like if I this is how I feel now, imagine what it's gonna be like if I'm in a relationship with this person for years. I mean, do I really think I'm gonna enjoy it after like much longer, you know? So is it really worth the physical attractiveness part of it to put up with something that I disagree with or don't feel comfortable with? And I think it's not worth it. I think it's not worth it because there's so many women out there in the world, literally, that there's so many options that you could find the person who is right for you, who you're attracted to enough to justify being in the relationship with them for the long term, while also matching morally and virtually. I mean, virtuously. Yeah.
Yeah, especially now with the how how much social media has expanded the capacities to get to meet people and online dating. I know we've talked about online dating before and stuff like that, but there's so much outreach where you can kind of find people that normally you weren't able to find because they were in another city or because they were in another country. One of my cousins, he's his girlfriend is from Europe, and he lived in Mexico. Now he's with her over there. But you think about it, back when our grandparents were alive, they weren't going to marry somebody in Europe because they didn't have any contact with people in Europe.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
could phone call someone just like randomly and see, but it's kind of like
Well, and that's the big
a waste of your time sometimes,
that's the big problem I have with modern dating is I feel like we have too many options, you know, and I think I
Mm,
mentioned before the experiments with like the ice cream flavors, like when you have 20 flavors of ice cream and people choose one, they're actually more dissatisfied with their choice and they also have a hard time choosing compared to choosing between three different ice cream flavors. And before,
mm,
back in the day before technology, people just went to a dance in their town and they met their future spouse there and they met them in high school or at public events because people used to actually go to events I mean, people still go to in-person events now, but back then that's all you had, and that's the only way you could have met people. And so you had fewer options and probably were more satisfied with your choices. And now I feel like people are frozen with so many options with the online dating platforms and all these social media and everything that people have a harder time choosing and people are becoming more and more picky and we see that with the numbers. If you look at the tender numbers and the rates of matches that guys get significantly fewer matches than women do. Women are getting like 100,000 matches, you know, a month or something, and men are getting like maybe less than 100. So like it's making people more picky, and it's actually probably making them more dissatisfied, and that's probably why you see more short-term hookups and short-term relationships. And it has to do with the culture. There's more factors than what I'm saying right now, but I
yeah.
think it's having negative effects too. Like there's definitely positive things, but I do think there's some negative stuff too that might be hurting our dating world. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Like I haven't looked too deep into it, but
I mean, I think about this like right now that we're talking about virtues. What if there was an app that highlighted people's virtues?
I think the
Like, for
problem,
example, like they're on their profile page, they could show, you know, like how they're patient, how they're humble, how they're like they have to fill out their profile based on virtues and kind of like, hey, volunteer experience, kind of almost like a college application, I guess, in a way, actually highlighting what they what they truly like do, I guess like a more well-rounded
right?
profile because from my experience, I don't want to generalize, but from my experience of looking at different profiles, it's very few profiles that I see that are actually wholesome, you
Yes,
know?
I that's why I kind of stopped the Tinder and Bumble and stuff for a while because I just it was all just hookup stuff. Like all these girls just want to hook up, and I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for. And I like it's like it's so hard to find people who genuinely just want a relationship. It's like it's kind of sad. I mean, I'm not saying that's how everyone is. but that's been my experience with using Tinder just and I know it's kind of like a hookup app, but that's this people don't only use it for that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
because we're dealing with a lot of other aspects, the aspect of, wanting attention, wanting to be
val
liked, to be
validation,
swiped left or right, whatever it is.
right?
Um, and so one woman and both woman and man want to be attractive and feel attractive. And so they'll almost share just a little bit more of the physicality aspect, right? In order to get matches.
Yeah, and, maybe that's maybe you're onto something because maybe I'm sure it's maybe the case that some of the women who are saying hook up on their dating bio are just saying that to maybe even get validation or increase their chances of a match with a male because the stereotype is that's what all males want. And so maybe some women just put it on there. I'm not saying all, but maybe some just put it on there to get a match, to get the validation they need to feel better, to increase their self-esteem. I mean, I don't know, but that's just an idea, I don't know for sure, but maybe one possibility, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and as somebody starts to think about where they could find a virtuous person, I mean, if it's harder to find it online, even though there's more options online, however, people who are virtuous perhaps are not creating profiles on those websites or those apps because they understand what type of intentions people might have. Perhaps it's having clear communication through your profile and saying like, "Hey, this is where I stand," you know, and just being patient with that, right? Because perhaps within the 500,000 profiles that are online, maybe only 5% or 2% or maybe 1% of that uh, would be potential matches. Then you have to, you know, kind of wait it out, you know? And so yeah, I think finding a virtuous person, I mean, where do you think you would find it or find a virtuous person? That going to local open mics or through a university event
yeah,
or maybe finding young adult groups in your
yeah, I
city?
mean, personally, I've found more virtuous people when I went to St. Mary's University. That's where I've had my first relationship that not my first relationship, but my first one where I felt like we were on the same page virtuously, and I feel like maybe it's because it was a place, a Catholic university, and I'm Catholic, maybe that's what helped with that, and I think just universities are probably the best places to find relationships because you're the same age group, maybe there's similar interests, it's easy to make small talk because 'cause you're like, "What class are you taking in?" Blah, blah, blah. But and then maybe outside college, maybe like you said, adult groups, church groups, singles groups, those dating events. I mean, honestly, because right now, like, I haven't been in any of those scenes because I'm just so busy with work all the time,
Yeah,
and
but
I'm in a small town, so there just really isn't much to do in that regard, so,
yeah,
you know? I feel like you almost have to be in a big city.
yeah, it's almost like you have to go to a bigger city, which
Just
is interesting because uh I live in San Antonio. So here right now, I mean, there's a chat of almost 800 young adults, that share events, what's going on in the city. And of course it's through like more of a Catholic setting. Um, but I mean, that's kind of where I am like trying to get to know people. And so I guess other people can start looking up different organizations, or there's also apps called Meetup. And so they have different interests and people meet up to go hiking, to go talk about songwriting, to go so different stuff, talk about marketing. So I think it's reaching out and looking at different groups, what is out there, and uh and seeing like where potentially you could find people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because if you don't
So
reach out, then the chances are almost always 0
yeah.
compared to reaching
Yeah,
out.
I'll be curious to see if there's any meetups like there at in Victoria.
Yeah,
Perhaps maybe there is like people who have similar interests,
yeah,
like film interest
I'll have to
or
check
stuff
that.
like that. Nice. Yeah, any last thoughts, Steele?
I think uh, I think we've learned in this podcast today that virtues are probably the most important thing in a relationship, and people can disagree, and that's okay. Like, let us know in the comments below, like, what you think. But yeah,
Yeah, I agree. We sometimes also need a balance, but if you were to choose one over the others, having a virtuous person is going to make both people's lives much easier, right? And well balanced, and potentially, you know, live a more joyful life, more peaceful life. And I guess it varies depending on person to person what that means. But um, I guess it might be something to look in deeper in another podcast.
yeah, definitely.
But thank you guys for watching. We appreciate you staying on. And until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care.